I had always imagined death would announce itself with sound, the scream of metal, the wail of engines, the thunder of guns, but in the first seconds of my first real battle, death came in silence. A stillness so sharp it felt like the world was holding its breath with me. The sun boiling on my canopy, the ocean below glittering like a broken promise. And in that blinding white glare, I knew one truth with terrifying clarity. If I flew like everyone else, I was going to die. April 7th, 1943, Guadalcanal. The kind of heat that makes sweat sting your eyes even before the shooting starts. My hands, young and clumsy and eager to live, tightened around the control stick of my Wildcat. I remember the way the leather felt worn, salt-stained, scuffed by men braver than me who hadn't come back. "Stay in formation, Swett. Don't break." Major Overend's voice crackled across the radio, steady like he had flown through hell enough times to be bored by it. But my eyes were fixed not on him, not on my squadron, not even on the horizon. I was staring into the sun. A hard, merciless coin hanging over the Pacific, blinding and holy and indifferent. It felt like a judge. Below, Tulagi Harbor looked so peaceful it almost mocked us like glass shattered across blue silk, and beyond it, rising from the edge of the earth, came the swarm. Val dive bombers in perfect V formations, Zeros weaving above like wolves protecting their hunt. 150 aircraft, maybe more. My heartbeat thudded against the oxygen mask. My mouth tasted like copper. This wasn't a mission. It was a sentence. I should have been scared, and I was, but there was something else too. A whisper, an instinct. The memory of quiet afternoons sitting in my cockpit while other boys gambled with cards and cigarettes. The angles I'd scribbled on the back of maps. The sun charts no one laughed at out loud, but everyone laughed at just the same. I am not the best shot. I am not the fastest flyer. I cannot outturn death. But I can blind it. That thought echoed like a prayer. Or maybe a confession. I felt sweat drip down the side of my face. The throttle trembled under my palm, just a little maybe from the vibration of the engine, maybe from my own bones shaking. College boy, they had called me. Adequate, the instructors wrote. Not gifted. Not born to this. I had come from San Mateo with dreams of blueprints, not bullets, circuits, not combat. I joined because flying looked interesting. God help me, that's what I told myself. Not noble, not furious, just curious. And now curiosity had brought me here, staring down the greatest aerial armada the Japanese had thrown at us in months. A sane man would listen to orders, stay with the formation, strike together, dive and run, survive by discipline. A sane man. The sun burned hotter. The radio hissed. Someone said, "My God, there's so many." Another voice muttered a prayer. Someone else cursed, low and hollow, like they knew they would not see another evening. "Hold position," Major Overend said. "We wait for—" I didn't hear the rest. I pushed the throttle to the stop. The Wildcat lurched forward like a held breath, finally exhaled. My plane clawed up into the blinding white. "Swett, get back here!" His voice cracked across my headset, coated in fury and fear. I flicked the radio switch off. Suddenly, there was no voice but my own breathing, echoing in the cramped metal cage around me. Air rushed past the canopy. The engine screamed as if it understood the madness better than I did. Climbing into the sun was like climbing into a furnace, heat pressing against my skin through layers of flight gear, burning into my eyelids. I shouldn't be here. I'm not ready. That's what fear said. But another voice rose beside it, quieter, steadier. No one is ready the first time. And yet, someone goes. Below me, the formation tightened. American fighters lined like specks of hope against the enormity of war. They looked small. Too small. And I had left them. I had abandoned formation, abandoned logic, abandoned command. I wasn't brave. I was terrified of dying the way others had, slowly, predictably, turning and twisting until a Zero clipped their wings like paper and fire swallowed them whole. I had seen their wreckage. I had smelled burned oil and flesh on the breeze when the wind carried from the coast. If I was going to die, I wanted it to be mine, my choice, my mistake, my attempt. The sun swallowed the world until there was nothing but white. My canopy turned into a shield of molten gold. My vision narrowed. My heart thudded so loudly it felt like it might drown out the engine. This is insane. This is genius. This is suicide. This is survival. Altitude climbed. Air thinned. Sweat pooled under my collar. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. The Japanese formation grew beneath me, ranks of steel birds, so many they looked like a dark cloud spreading across the Pacific, and I was a single point rising above them, a speck of dust diving toward the light. I angled the mirror, just a small adjustment. A sliver of metal, taped inside my cockpit like a secret sin. My breath fogged my mask. My gloves felt slick. Somewhere far below, someone was shouting my name into a radio I could no longer hear. I wasn't thinking about medals or glory or history. I wasn't thinking about tactics or doctrine or the Geneva Convention. I wasn't even thinking about killing. I was thinking about living. I dipped the wing. The sunlight hit. A sharp white sting flared inside the cockpit, bounced, caught the mirror, shattered into a beam. A spear of light forged not by science or strategy, but by fear and instinct and the stubborn refusal to be another dead boy in the Pacific. For one quiet moment, suspended between sky and sea, between sanity and madness, I whispered to myself, if I fall today, let it be after trying something no one else dared. My hand tightened, the wildcat trembled, ready to dive, ready to strike with light instead of lead. And then gravity took hold. I rolled into the sun, alone and unseen, a rookie flying into brilliance and danger and destiny. I didn't invent sunlight. I didn't invent fear either. But somewhere between those two simple things, light and terror, the idea took root. They think innovation arrives like thunder, in a flash of brilliance. For me, it arrived like boredom. Long, cruel boredom. Guadalcanal wasn't always roaring skies and sirens. Sometimes it was heat, silence, and hours, pretending we weren't waiting to die. While the veterans played poker and smoked, I sat alone in my wildcat after patrols, fingers tracing sweat-slicked instruments, head tilted as if the answers to life and death were hiding behind plexiglass. Outside the canopy, jungle steam rose and flies hummed near the fuel drums. Inside, there was just me and geometry. Angles, refraction, glass curvature, sun position. The others joked, college boys doing homework again. Maybe they thought it kept me calm. Maybe they thought I was scared to join their card games. Truth is, I was scared to join their funerals. I had watched pilots swagger off, laugh, slap backs, spit jokes, and then sometimes one wouldn't come back. And the laughter the next day always sounded quieter. You can tell yourself war makes heroes, but mostly war makes ghosts. One afternoon, I leaned back in the cockpit, the seat hot enough to burn through flight trousers, and stared at the glass above me. The sun stabbed into my eyes, a merciless blade. I squinted, raised a hand, and thought, if this hurts through goggles, what if it strikes unprotected eyes? Crazy, I told myself. And yet, pilots don't win by being sane. They win by being alive. I tested theory in my head, first lines drawn on back of maps, flight path scribbles beside doodles of bombers. The canopy curvature wasn't ideal. Too diffuse. Needed a reflector, a polished surface, a better angle. I didn't have a laboratory. I had duct tape and stubbornness. When I first taped the small depot mirror inside my cockpit, it felt like sacrilege, like modifying a coffin you expected to be buried in. I ran my fingers across the cool metal edge. 5 inches of bent aluminum. Nothing heroic about it, nothing elegant. It smelled faintly of oil. That mirror could kill me, I knew. A flash at the wrong time, A moment blind, a stall, and I'd just be another burning memory falling into the Pacific. But not trying felt like dying slowly, and I was too young to die slowly. The first test, poor Frank Mackenzie. We were only a few hundred yards apart. I banked, caught the sun, rolled slightly. The flash hit him like an angel or a demon, I don't know which. He jerked violently, broke formation, nearly flipped. On the ground he stormed up, face red, voice trembling not with anger but with the realization of fragility. "What the hell was that? I thought I was dying up there." I lied. "Sun hit wrong, Frank. Sorry." He didn't believe me. I didn't expect him to. Second test, Walsh. I trusted him. He flew behind me, like a Zero would. We climbed, engines howling against gravity. I rolled, timed it, and when the sun burst across his canopy, I felt him flinch, even before he pulled away. The radio crackled with panic. "Jesus, Swett, don't ever." I switch clicked off mid-sentence. I didn't want apology. I wanted proof. When we landed, Walsh ripped his goggles off, blinking like a man waking from a nightmare. "You're insane," he muttered. Then his voice softened, worry overriding anger. "Don't do that again. It'll kill someone." "It already does," I whispered. He didn't understand. Zeros were killing real men daily. If light could stop even one, madness became mercy. But war doesn't reward creativity softly. Major Overend's summons came quick. His tent smelled of sweat, dust, and the endless authority of a man who buried too many sons not born to him. He looked at me with the fatigue of someone forced to play father to boys, given wings and guns and prayers instead of childhoods. No optical tricks, no disorientation tactics. Against rules, dangerous, reckless. I saluted, obeyed, left. Then Walsh leaned in and whispered, "You're not actually stopping, right?" I didn't answer with words, just a thin smile. Orders stop on lips. Survival starts in the soul. From then on, I trained alone. No witnesses, no records, afternoon sun, climbing spirals, timed rolls until my stomach lurched and my vision tunneled. Sweat soaked my collar daily. My hands blistered where the stick rubbed raw. Some nights I lay on my bunk staring at my palms red, swollen, trembling, and wondered if this was genius or fear-driven madness. I could hear pilots laughing outside the tent, cards slapping the table, boots thudding on coral soil. I envied them. Their simplicity, their courage without doubt. I was not brave like that. I was afraid every single day, and that fear sharpened me. Every risk I took, every turn I practiced, every flash I rehearsed wasn't for glory. It was because dying blind and helpless terrified me more than dying trying something no one believed in. By the time radar reported the April raid inbound, my mirror had become part of the cockpit, as familiar as the gauge panel, as intimate as breath. And when the horn sounded and men ran, grabbing helmets, tightening straps, shouting orders, I didn't feel excitement. I felt inevitability. The universe had drawn a line. On one side, rules, fear, tradition. On the other, sunlight, instinct, desperation. I climbed into the cockpit. The mirror glinted once, a small silver smile. Someone clapped my shoulder. Someone else wished luck. Luck. No, not luck. Light. Geometry. A quiet boy's refusal to die, forgotten in the sun-boiled silence of Guadalcanal. As engines roared and our birds lifted off the dirt strip, one by one, I touched the mirror lightly, like a talisman, and whispered, so soft, no one, not even God, might hear. Let madness save me. Let light guide me. Let me be foolish enough to live. The sky did not explode all at once. It unfolded into violence the way a storm does. First a tremor, a shift in the air, a quiet that feels like a hand tightening around your throat. I remember looking down and seeing the Japanese formation swell beneath me, dark wings glinting like knives. The ocean flashed between them, a cold blue witness to the fire about to come. My wildcat trembled, part engine, part heartbeat. I knew the mathematics of what I was attempting, but math does not prepare the soul. Nothing in training warns you how your stomach rises into your throat when the horizon tilts and the world becomes only sunlight and fear. The moment I rolled into the sun, the cockpit filled with white heat so bright it erased shape and shadow. My world dissolved into blindness I had chosen. Then gravity took me, and I dove. Wind tore across the canopy, and the wildcat shuddered like it wanted to break free and flee. The sun was a hammer behind me, the sky in front, a trembling mirror of blue and steel. Below, the valves flew disciplined, arrow straight, their pilots trusting formation more than instinct. They never saw me. Not really. They saw the sun. And I made myself the sun's ghost. I rolled not a simple fighter roll, but a twisting, violent spiral. The mirror caught the light and turned it into something savage, a white spear, a blinking god's eye. For a heartbeat I saw the lead valve's canopy flash, a hand raised, a reflexive flinch, then chaos. Two aircraft jerked toward each other like frightened birds. The collision was not sound first, it was shape. A sudden violent blooming of wings and metal and flame. Only then did the sound reach me, a muffled roar through my canopy like someone slamming a door in the house of heaven. 2 men died in less time than it takes to blink. My lungs locked. I had imagined the theory, not the reality. Death does not feel like victory up close. It feels like gravity dropping out beneath the ribs. I wanted to freeze, to breathe, to scream, but the air tore around me, and there was no time for doubt. I snapped the stick back, felt blood drag toward my feet, vision graying at the edges. The wildcat groaned, a living thing, asking why I demanded madness from it. The Japanese formation convulsed, scattering like a hive struck by stone. And in that fracture, instinct returned. I saw a Val wavering, still half-blinded, and my guns knew their job even before I did. I squeezed the trigger. 50 caliber rounds hammered forward. A burst, 3 seconds. Maybe less, but each one felt like eternity. Tracers lanced into the engine block, and flame spat from its nose. The bomber rolled, nose slumping as if exhausted, spiraling downward in a slow, reluctant surrender. A small voice rose inside me, shaken and trembling. That was a man with a name. But war does not pause for grief. A Zero dove toward me, a white flash of wings, teeth bared in steel and velocity. If I tried turning with him, I was dead. If I tried running, I was dead. There are moments where instinct is louder than training, where the body moves before the mind catches up, and mine jerked the stick back toward the sun again. The cockpit flared. The mirror flashed. The Zero jerked violently, too violently, and broke away in terror. He pulled too hard. I saw his wings tremble, shiver, then tear away like paper kissed by fire. For an instant the aircraft held shape, a ghost clinging to existence. Then it fell apart, and so did he. I had not fired a round, yet the sky swallowed him just the same. The radio screamed somewhere below, voices crackling in panic, in awe, in anger. I could imagine Major Overend yelling orders at a silence where my voice should have been, but I had shut him out. I had shut everyone out. It was just me and the sun, and the knowledge that every decision now traced a line between courage and insanity. The Japanese formation lost rhythm. Men who once flew like extensions of a single will were suddenly alone, separate, frightened. Fear spreads faster than smoke in war. It clouds judgment, breaks discipline, bends fate. I rolled again, another flash, another break in their movement. A third Val swerved too hard, wingtip clipping his partner. Metal sheared, flames licked across blue sky. I could feel heat in my memory, even though I was far above heat and the terrible beauty of destruction. My breath broke, sharp and ragged. I was not triumphant. I was terrified of what I had unleashed. Then instinct turned to hunger, not bloodlust, but survival. There was no room for hesitation, no one to save me but myself. When ammo ran low, when the sun dipped just a fraction, I dove again, this time close enough to see goggles, painted insignia. even a shaking hand fumbling at controls. I pressed the trigger. Rounds spit fire. The bomber in my sights buckled, its wing folding backward like a wounded bird. I pulled up hard to avoid debris, heart hammering so violently I thought it might burst. The world shrieked past engines howling, metal rattling, gravity clawing at my bones. 13 minutes, that was all. But it felt like hours folded into seconds. 7 kills, 3 by light, 4 by gun. And then, silence. Not true silence. Engines still roared, radios still crackled somewhere, but inside me there was a quiet so deep it felt carved from bone. Smoke trailed behind my Wildcat, holes riddled the wings. My ammo drums were nearly empty. Below, burning fragments dotted the ocean like funeral torches. I turned toward home, the adrenaline drained. And suddenly I felt 19 again. Just a kid. Just a boy who wanted to fly because flying looked beautiful. When Henderson Field finally appeared, dusty strip, tents shimmering in heat, I didn't feel victory. I felt like I had stolen time from death, and death hadn't yet noticed. My engine sputtered, coughed, surrendered. I hit the water hard, salt bursting into my mouth, straps biting into my shoulders. Cold, silence. Then hands dragging me into a boat, voices shouting, blurry shapes leaning over me. Someone yelled, "That's Swett! He did it, he!" Those words vanished under another man's shout, anger, or disbelief. I couldn't tell. I lay on the deck, chest heaving, water dripping from my flight suit, and stared up at the sun that had both saved me and damned others. The same sun that warmed grains of sand and kissed the Pacific now burned through the smoke of falling aircraft. And somewhere in that blinding gold, I wondered whether I had survived by brilliance or madness. When Major Overend reached me, his boots heavy on the planks, I braced for the explosion, reprimand, court-martial, condemnation. He stared at me, rage fighting with awe, duty fighting with disbelief. "You," he whispered, "you just made ace in 15 minutes." I didn't feel proud. I felt tired. Utterly human. Utterly breakable. "I didn't win out there, sir," I said quietly. "I just didn't die." Salt still clung to my lips when they dragged me off that patrol boat, salt from the Pacific, salt from Swett, salt from the taste of being alive when I should not have been. My flight suit was soaked, boots heavy with seawater, breath shaking in that shallow, erratic way a body breathes when it has not yet convinced itself that survival is real. Men crowded around me, some cheering, some staring, some whispering like they were afraid, saying my name too loudly might break whatever spell had carried me back. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a man who had jumped off a cliff and somehow missed the rocks. Major Overend approached. His shadow fell across me before his voice did. His expression, God, I can still see it, built from fury, welded to awe, disbelief, hammered together with paternal dread. He had sent boys to war and buried too many. I was supposed to be another cross in another jungle. Instead, I had risen from the water like a myth nobody asked for. "You disobeyed orders," he said quietly, voice tight enough to cut steel. "Yes, sir." "You endangered yourself, the mission, and your entire division." "Yes, sir." "You," his jaw clenched. A muscle jumped near his temple. "You destroyed 7 Japanese aircraft." I didn't answer. I didn't know how. 7. A number that felt unreal, monstrous, accidental. It wasn't pride that settled in my chest, it was a hollow sort of grief and confusion, like waking from a nightmare you somehow survived by instinct instead of reason. He exhaled, slow, heavy, as if trying to breathe out the burden of command. Then the corners of his mouth twitched, not joy, not approval, but the reluctant respect men give when the world refuses to behave the way they were taught it should. "You made ace in 15 minutes, he murmured. "Pentagon's going to lose their minds." His hand gripped my shoulder, not congratulation, not reprimand, something between them, something human. Inside I felt no triumph, just trembling. and an ache running through every joint like fear had settled in my bones and refused to leave. Later, in the after-action tent, they questioned me. 6 hours of officers, analysts, men with notepads and stern brows, scribbling as though my explanation might rewrite gravity. They wanted precision. Describe sun angle. Describe mirror orientation. How many flashes? What exact roll rate? Were you intending to induce collision? That last one struck me hardest. I looked down at my hands, still shaking slightly, and answered with truth. I was intending to live. They studied my gun camera footage, grainy frames where chaos played frame by sputtering frame planes, flaring into flame, silhouettes peeling away, trails of smoke twisting like wounded serpents. They stared at the evidence like men staring at something both miraculous and dangerous. The room buzzed with debate. Brilliant improvisation. Borderline illegal. Reckless endangerment. Possible new doctrine. Potential war crime? I sat there, boots still wet, smelling like fuel and salt and adrenaline, and wondered why they were arguing theory while I could still taste fear in the back of my throat. They talked tactics. I remembered faces blurred through glass, but human. They talked statistics. I remembered the weight of gravity pinning my body as planes fell. They talked doctrine. I remembered a flash of wings tearing off, and the silence that followed. Hero? Genius? Madman? I felt like none of those things. I felt like someone who had survived by accident and daring, not destiny. 2 months later, they put a medal in my hand, the Medal of Honor. People clapped, cameras flashed, uniforms glittered. Secretary Frank Knox spoke my name with reverence. The ribbon felt heavy around my neck, like a chain forged from expectation. I remembered the men who didn't come home. I remembered how light looked when it blinded another pilot into panic. I remembered the smell of burning metal and ocean salt and fear. It was just my job, I said. 14 words. Quick, simple, true enough. I didn't feel larger. I didn't feel braver. I felt smaller, like the metal weighed more than I could carry if I thought about it too long. Offers came. Interviews. Book deals. A motion picture. I refused them all. Not because I was humble, because the story wasn't mine alone, and because explaining what I did meant admitting I hadn't been fearless. I had been terrified, desperate, clinging to life by sunlight and instinct. Men like me are not forged in glory. We are forged in the quiet moments before battle, when fear knocks and we answer anyway. The debates continued in offices far from gunfire. Men with rank and polished shoes argued ethics that the sky had already answered. They questioned what war allowed, what war punished, what war demanded. Some called what I'd done resourceful. Some called it dangerous. Some whispered, "We should always fight fair." Fair. I thought of the Zero pilots who turned a dive into fire and ocean. War has never cared about fair. War only cares who breathes when the sky turns quiet again. They ran tests afterward. Instructors rolled into the sun, felt vertigo claw their senses. Reports came back stamped. Effective. Another. Extraordinarily hazardous. Another. Limited application. But beneath the stamps and signatures, I could feel their unease. A weapon of imagination frightened strategists more than a weapon of steel. Because steel, you can measure. Imagination, you cannot predict. When I walked out of the briefing hall that final day, sunlight hit my face again, clean, ordinary, just a warm afternoon glow. But something inside me had shifted. The sun was no longer only brightness. It was a memory, a blade, a ghost, a companion that had saved me and doomed others. I touched the side of my cockpit later that evening, running my fingers along the metal like greeting an old friend, haunted by the same ghosts I carried. The mirror was gone, rulemakers saw to that, but its absence felt louder than presence ever did. War teaches strange lessons. Sometimes survival is skill. Sometimes it's luck. And sometimes, against every book and command and common sense taught by wiser men, sometimes survival is light. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel guilty. I felt responsible for living, when so many did not. They say a tactic becomes doctrine only when blood and bureaucracy agree. Mine never convinced bureaucracy. It convinced blood first. Word filtered through the squadrons like rumor carried on jungle wind. The rookie lit the sky with sunlight and came home alive. Pilots, who had laughed at my diagrams, now whispered them like prayer. Mechanics began polishing canopy frames without asking why. Young flyers tilted their heads toward the sun during idle moments, squinting like they were trying to understand what I had seen up there, what I had dared. I never told them the truth. I didn't see genius. I saw fear so deep it begged for a weapon no one had noticed. But war has a strange way of making madness contagious. Training shifted. Not on paper, never on paper, not at first, but in the air. Someone would call out over the field, "Sun's at 60, boys," and the practice began. You cannot imagine the sight unless you lived it. 8 wildcats rising like salmon fighting upstream, engines howling against gravity, spiraling into light, rolling at the peak until wings blurred and the sun shattered off metal like glass thrown into heaven. Each flash, a heartbeat. Each heartbeat a dare against death. On the ground, mechanics shaded their eyes, squinting upward with a mixture of dread and awe. One muttered once, voice low like a prayer, "They're dancing with God or taunting him." I didn't feel worthy of either interpretation. I tried to teach caution, emphasize timing, angle, throttle control. But there's no safe way to teach defiance. And the line between courage and disaster is razor thin when you fly into a furnace sky. The first accident hit hard. A young pilot, eager, shaking with the thrill of trying something forbidden, rolled too low, too slow. His wings stalled. His wildcat bucked once, twice, then plunged nose first. The explosion was distant, but I felt the heat in my chest like a brand. They pulled him from the wreckage in silence. No band, no speeches, just smoke curling against palm trees and the metallic smell of burned hope. I carried that weight. I still do. This was not invention. This was inheritance born in fire. You cannot teach desperation. You can only survive long enough that others try to borrow it. Then Bougainville came. We intercepted nearly 100 Japanese aircraft that day, Val bombers and their Zero Guardians, confident and silver like the war was still theirs to command. 8 of us climbed into the sun, timing our ascent to the minute, the seconds, the breath. The enemy saw us too late. Or maybe they saw only glare. A flash. A tilt. A panic pull. Metal tearing in air that vibrated like heat off a desert road. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like inevitability. 9 kills by gun, 8 more by light, by fear, by instinct, snapping bones inside cockpits, miles above waves. And when it was over, the Japanese scattered, not defeated in body, but wounded in spirit. Later, one captured pilot spoke through an interpreter, voice shaking, "America has turned the sun into a blade. We fear noon." I felt no pride hearing that. Only an ache, because I knew what fear tasted like, and I had carved mine into theirs. Word traveled fast. The phrase spread across ready rooms and briefing tents. Swett's window. 1100 to 1500. The sacred hours. Sacred. A cruel word. The sky isn't holy just because it kills you more slowly. Pilots polished mirrors inside cockpits. Maintenance crews experimented with reflective strips. Flight instructors forced trainees to hold altitude until their vision blurred, lungs burning from thin air, counting seconds by instinct instead of clocks. But for all the imitation, the truth whispered in my chest during lonely nights. Some things cannot be taught. You either fly into the sun because you're brave, or because the alternative feels like drowning in inevitability. And I had never been brave. Just unwilling to die, obedient. By autumn, Japanese pilots avoided midday combat over the Solomons. Not by order, by belief. The sun had become haunted to them. They called it Kurugari no Jikan, the dark hours in daylight. I remember hearing that and feeling a shiver. Because darkness and light are not opposites in war. They are mirrors reflecting the same truth. A man can die in daylight as easily as in night. And sometimes, the brightest weapon leaves the darkest shadow. One evening, after training ended and the jungle cicadas buzzed in broken rhythms, I sat alone on an ammunition crate with my flight gloves in my lap. They were stiff with salt and oil, fingers curled as if still wrapped around a stick. I whispered to the empty air, as if talking to the sky itself. I didn't want worship, I wanted a chance. There was no answer. Only whine through palms, carrying the distant rumble of surf and the faint smell of engine oil clinging to my skin. Men now flew into the sun because I had. Men now died trying because I had not. The weight of that truth pressed heavier than my metal would months later. Innovation is not genius. It is consequence. And every miracle costs something, even if the world pretends otherwise. I went to sleep that night staring at the tent ceiling, the light of a lantern flickering like sun glancing off metal. My dreams were not of glory, or medals, or headlines. They were of wings tearing in silence and sunlight sharp as regret. History likes clean endings, neat victories, heroes standing tall, sunlight behind them, medals gleaming like polished truth. But real endings are quieter. They live in memory, not parades. They whisper, they linger, and sometimes they ache. When the war finally loosened its grip on my life, I did not feel triumphant. I felt released, like a hand that had been clutching my throat finally let go. I came home to California not as a legend, not even as a soldier. I came home as a man who had stared into sunlight and seen both salvation and damnation staring back. People wanted stories. They wanted daring tales, soaring triumphs, the thrill of fire and sky. And when I gave them silence, they gave me confusion. When I turned down interviews, they offered louder applause, as if volume could lure memory onto a stage. But war is not a script, and I did not survive to perform. So I became an engineer, the life I once imagined, before airplanes turned the sky into a ledger of lives kept and lost. Drafting tables replaced cockpits, mechanical pencils replaced gun triggers, blueprints replaced flight plans. Sometimes, late in the office, sunlight would strike the drafting lamp's metal arm just right, a glint, a shard of memory, and for a heartbeat, my breath would catch. A flash was no longer a tactic, just light, harmless, quiet, human. Yet part of me always flinched, not from fear of dying, but from the memory of how badly I once needed not to. Years passed. Hair grayed. My hands, which once shook from adrenaline, now trembled only from age. My children asked what war was like. I told them the truth, not the one carved onto monuments, but the kind that keeps a man's voice soft. It was a time when doing something crazy felt safer than doing nothing at all. I never raised my voice, never bragged, never claimed brilliance. Because brilliance implies confidence and I only ever had desperation and geometry. The Corps made my method doctrine. Pilots trained in it. Instructors lectured on angles, glare tactics, solar masking, high-angle approach vectors. They used my name in manuals, the Swett method, long after I was gone from the cockpit. When jets arrived, they found new suns to hide in afterburner glare, heat shimmer, cloud flash. Top Gun instructors drilled it into the new generation. Use the light, deny the enemy vision, disappear into brilliance. I should have felt pride. Instead, I felt distance, like watching a child grow into someone you love but no longer understand. Fighter pilots in F-16 seconds and F-22 seconds trained in classrooms far more polished than ours in Guadalcanal. They memorized my angles as if physics were courage. They asked instructors, was he fearless? And someone, somewhere, would answer a legend's version of me. But the truth is simpler. I was not fearless. I was afraid deeply, painfully human, and that fear taught me to survive. Courage isn't absence of fear. It is terror harnessed, turned into something sharp enough to cut fate. January 2009. My body finally rested where the Pacific wind no longer reached. My funeral was quiet as I asked. No theatrics, no speeches carved from marble tone, just a flag, a folded triangle, and silence deep as ocean night. Yet Marines came anyway from a squadron that carried my lineage in their blood and tail numbers. 4 FA-18 seconds roared overhead. One broke formation climbing toward the sun at 62 degrees. My angle, my legacy drawn in sky one last time. And for a moment just a breath time folded. A wildcat climbed with him, invisible but real, engine growling like it did in 1943. Someone read a letter from an old pilot I never met. You never knew me, but over Peleliu, I used your tactic. I came home. My crew came home. Because of your courage, I lived to see my grandchildren. Thank you doesn't cover it, but thank you. There were others, hundreds. Lives I never touched, but somehow shaped by a moment in air where desperation met sunlight. That is the strange inheritance of war. To save strangers more than brothers, to protect futures you never see. Years later, historians called my tactic innovation. Students called it genius. Pilots called it brave. The enemy called it terrifying. My children called me Dad. But in the quiet space inside my memory, in the part untouched by medals or myth, I know what I was. A scared young man who refused to die without trying something impossible. A boy who looked at the sun and believed survival might shine brighter than fear. A pilot who chose light over surrender. I didn't change air combat alone. I simply proved the sky could be questioned, and sometimes it answers with fire and miracles. When they ask what weapon won that day, you can name the Wildcat, the Browning, 50 seconds, the altitude, the training. But I know the truth. It wasn't steel. It wasn't bullets. It wasn't even skill. It was imagination. And the courage to trust it.